So, all right. So I wanted to talk about Rich Dad Poor Dad. So who in here has actually read this book? So 3 people. I would read it again. And this is kind of why I wanted to go through some of this, because the other day when I read this in Op Meeting and just did that a little bit in Op Meeting, it really made me think about how little we really understand assets minus liabilities, cash, growing a business, that business ownership mindset versus an employee mindset. We really don't, most of the time, have that. If you do have that, you're really on your way to RVP typically. So anyways, I was flipping through this and I was thinking about some of the things that are really important. And I'm going to draw a few of these key ideas that are out of the book that are important to understand. So number one, he talks about how when you're young, for instance, when you're poor or you're a young person and you live at home kind of thing. Remember what I said about the poor rent their income and they also rent where they live. The middle class own where they live. They rent their income. The rich, they own both, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of this is that idea, okay? So you have kind of 2 big boxes, right? And this box kind of cuts in half, and down here you have expenses. Now that's like, what would be that? That'd be like gas for your car, food, taxes, clothes, stuff like that, right? Got it? So these are expenses. Now, you have an income. This is sound familiar for everybody, because this is how a job works. Income, called a what? Paycheck. Yep. You get a paycheck from your job, pays you money, right? What do you do with that money? It goes down to pay for expenses, and basically it goes out. I mean, when I was a kid, geez, this was just up till a handful of years ago, really. There really weren't any assets and liabilities, which you would think of like down here. Because when you're young, do you really have a liability? An expense isn't really a liability. It's not like a credit card bill, a car note. That's a liability. An expense is like gas in your car, that food. It's not like creditors are coming for you if you don't pay this kind of thing, right? So it looks very much different. Well, that's how the poor are. They don't own anything or really owe anything. That's why they just have like expenses. They just got to pay their NIPSCO every month. They just got to keep up their rent, which is kind of it's liability, but there's not many liabilities. It's just basically all expenses. Low income, high expenses, almost no assets and liabilities. That's when we're like really young or really broke, okay? Kind of where we stand. Now here's the cash flow quadrant for the middle class, okay? The middle class, screen's a little better. We still got the 2 boxes, right? But now we're going to be able to add in the next 2. When I was really young, I had a hard time understanding this when I first read this book. I was only 15 years old. At 15 years old, a lot of this stuff is like, if I would have had somebody really explain it to me, I think it would have made a lot more sense. But it wasn't following, So, okay. All right. So I didn't want to mess this up. So for the middle class, what do they have? They still have a job. So they're still renting their income. Okay. So their income comes down to here. They pay expenses. It's on its way out, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's kind of like coming in the left, on its way out on the right. It goes down to pay for liabilities, which are like a form of more expenses, and then back out. Now, so a liability, so the expenses would be back to like saying earlier, this is like taxes, taxes, mortgage, fixed expenses, food, clothing, fun. Down here, liabilities is back to like a mortgage, consumer loans, credit cards. Consumer loan is like a car loan, that kind of thing. Now, if they have an asset, what would it be? usually the only asset they have is a 401k if they have an asset, correct?
Right.
So that's really important to understand, right? So that is how the middle class operates. It's honestly it's not a whole lot different than how I operated at 16 years old. You just added in a couple of liabilities as far as a car loan. I had that by 18. You know what I mean? I lived like that for a decade, you know. Long time. So that's the middle class. Now, let's see how things work kind of for the rich. Okay. So the next phase would be how the wealthy work. So we'll kind of clean this up a little bit. That's just really not going to work trying to do that. My markers are all dying. We go through dry erase markers around here like at a pace that's unbelievable. So how do the rich make money? They have assets, and assets create income. It's that simple. Now, there is more to it, right? So income can be called dividends. So for those of you guys studying securities, dividends like, money they make because their stock went up, mutual fund went up, that sort of thing, okay? What else could they have? Just interest they're making on, so if a mutual fund went up and they own a bunch of shares, they're going to get dividends, but they also just get interest, right? So they could make interest, could own some property or something like that, so they could have rental income. That one's a really smart one to acquire in this world. It's just more people, like real estate's way up there on the top 2 to 3, if not number 1, forms of business that have gotten people rich. So real estate, and then what else would it be? Like the business quadrant. So that business. I got that business, and that thing's making money, right? It's an asset of some sort, and it's spinning off cash. Okay? Now, what might the assets be? So they're kind of what was creating the income, like we were talking about, right? Could be stocks, bonds, real estate, intellectual properties. So that's like you got intellectual properties. I won't get in. Or a business, okay? So like we were saying, so those assets they spin off income, okay? Now does that income have an expense? Yeah, but that's what's beautiful about being a business owner. You can create these to help offset this so that you end up paying less taxes, okay? So I think that key is really important. So he kind of drew out, and this is what I did understand when I was young, was kind of the picture between the difference of a middle class person and a rich person. Okay, he calls it his educated dad versus his rich dad. So his educated dad had a great college degree, that kind of thing. So he had a big income. I'll try to make them somewhat similar in size. Okay, he had a pretty good income, but he also had a pretty big expenses. Because we always hear the more money you make, the more money you spend. Like it's like that. It's kind of the more money the guy makes, more money he spends. Assets were small, so this is income, expenses, assets, liabilities. Doesn't that look like your family? I mean, that's welcome to the middle class, right? We make money, we spend it, we have very little to our actual name in cash. Okay? Now, what does rich dad look like? He had a big income. He had very low expenses. He had huge amount of assets and very small amount of liabilities. So that's just a flip. Same idea, just flipped. So what happens is when you're doing it right, your income from your assets, this is how the rich get richer. Okay? I'll just quote the book. A review of my rich dad's financial statement is why the rich get richer. The asset column generates more than enough income to cover expenses. So it comes up, right? It has more than enough to cover the expenses. So what happens is if there's more than enough, what do you get? Overflow, which means you can buy more assets, which then create more income. And if expenses didn't go up too much, right, or anything, you get more assets, and the rich get richer. So the rich don't get richer because there's some, like, you know, like you always hear me saying in meetings, yeah, part of it came from, maybe you came from the right gene pool. That was a good kickstart, you know, but like the reality is most billionaires were, they're single getting there, you know, single lifetime, they're self-made. You know, nobody gets there on their own, but, you know, self-made's the idea, one generation kind of thing. And it's because of understanding this idea. How does it work over here? You work for your income. You spend it all. There's nothing left to put into the asset pool. Because there's nothing left, what do I got to go do? Work, try to get more income, to keep paying all of these expenses. Which is why, like Dave Ramsey says, one of the best things you do is pay off all your debt, lower your expenses, take the truck payment, go get a Honda, whatever. Part of the reason he's saying that is he's trying to make you understand this side. Because if you understood this side, you could own assets that would make you money, and then you wouldn't have to work anymore. Got it? I mean, it's really simple, but it's like not even close to how the United States of America and anybody in it almost is operating, right? I mean, this is literally how the top 1% to 2% is operating. And I would say it's probably less than the 1 because so many people in the 1% have jobs. They just make a high income, but they just have huge high expenses and liabilities. You know what I mean? So often you see the guy in the Rolls Royce or whatever downtown Chicago, he's got a Ferrari. He's got a big high executive job somewhere downtown Chicago, but if he lost his job, he would also lose his car because he's got a liability loan on it. You see what I mean? It's not cash. You know, it's not real wealth. Like, I had so many assets that this one asset of mine, whatever it was, let's say it was my business, it made so much income that I'm going to pay a lot of taxes. So I need to lower taxes. So how do I do that? Well, I need to lease or create an expense for that business so it appears not to creating so much income, right? So you actually with a real business, you actually get to take assets through expenses up to income and then back down. It doesn't really go around expenses. You get to go through expenses. The rich get to make money, don't get taxed yet, figure out what they want to buy, spend it on, then that determines what they have to pay taxes on. Not make money, pay the taxes, live out my year, at the end of the year, file, get a return on what it didn't use kind of thing. Make sense? So this guy might go lease a $3,000 a month McLaren because his business is making too much money. Right. So it's like Bill Arender said, the Detroit Fast Start School. He says rich people out of their abundance buy nice things. You think they're buying nice things because they're just trying to get nice things. No. It's out of their abundance that they buy nice things because there's so much blessing. There's so much abundance. I'm just going to pay too much in taxes this year. I've got to use the American system called capitalism and go do something with it so I don't pay so much in taxes. Make sense? So how does it relate to Primerica? A base shop is almost on this side. Now it's not 100%, but this side's almost like a base shop. Because having a base shop is like having a job. You gotta be there every op night, you gotta be there every Saturday, you gotta run it, you gotta do training, you gotta be planed, you gotta be in the field, you gotta go and catch tables, you gotta work almost like a job. See what I mean? That's why you hear lots of leaders say, work this thing like a job till it treats you like a business. Well, it's not treating you like a business at first. You still have expenses and liabilities in your life, right, that you acquired before you came to Primerica, right? So your higher income in Primerica, allows you to do what? If you do a good job, it allows you to pay down your expenses and your liabilities. If you're smart, you don't stretch your income. Not stretch your income. You stretch your income without stretching your expenses and liabilities. See what I mean? It's kind of like Bobby Boyson was still driving like a Volkswagen Beetle or something. He said he had his old VW when he was making like a few $100,000 in like 1982. You know, it's like he's making a ton of money in today's money, and he was still like driving his Volkswagen Jetta. And they were like, "What are you doing, Bobby?" He's like, "I'm acquiring assets. I'm getting rich so that I like don't have to worry about money ever again, because the assets will just spin off." And I remember one time, this a long time ago, but it was 06, 07. I was brand new. I was part-time, you know, and I'm at this event, and Bobby was there, and he was the guest speaker. And Citigroup stock was going really well, and Primerica was owned by Citigroup, and he owned so many shares that he had like voting rights like on the board. It was crazy. And I remember him saying at this Fast Start school that in Primerica that year, Primerica had paid him $4 million. Okay? But that year he had made $12 million between Primerica and just dividends, not even interest. He said, my dividend income this year in Primerica income was $12 million. That means he made $8 million from dividends. He said, if you acquire enough assets, it will outgrow what your Primerica income could ever be. I remember Shane Rudman saying that one time. He says, I had to get back into the base to try to build my organization bigger because my assets were making so much more money than my Primerica business, I literally couldn't keep up because my savings was growing so fast. Wouldn't that be cool? See, that's one of the things that we like don't necessarily pay attention to or understand. You go, wow, that guy makes $1 million. You're in Primerica, and you go, yeah, but you don't understand that guy's making $5 million a year right now. Now, it doesn't mean he's spending it, but he's acquiring it. Because what's he doing? Filtering it back in, acquiring more assets, okay? Reinvesting. So base shop is like this. So when you're running your base shop life like this, the goal is to squeeze the liabilities and squeeze the expenses. Try to lower it down, slim down, so you can start to build the assets. Now, what is an asset really in Primerica? We do have what? We have equity. So you get Primerica stock, right? They give that to you. When you go over RVP, they give you $15,000 in cash. Okay, in Primerica stock. I mean, they just give it to you. Like, hey, good job going to RVP. There's $15,000 in stock. Right? That's cool.
Sweet.
Like minus QBI, my original money from like going to RVP is worth like $25,000 now, I think. So I got like 25 grand in savings just from when I went to RVP. It's like, okay, cool, you know,
Yeah.
dig that, you know, right? So stock, okay. What else can you do? You can open up a SEP IRA it's like a self-employed type IRA, which will allow you to start dumping cash, savings, right? And you can start saving into mutual funds. Start to build up your asset column, okay? These are very similar to what the world has available to them. What is the biggest asset? Anybody try to help me out? What's the biggest asset that we can create in Primerica once you're in RVP? Now you can promote RVPs. RVPs are also an asset. So you hear Whittle talk about this a lot. He says that guy makes $100,000 a year. Every RVP will make you roughly $50,000, okay? So if you're an RVP, SNSD, really, let's just call it like you're an SNSD, and you have an RVP that makes you 50 grand a year, is that RVP an asset?
Yes.
Absolutely. To your bank account, your income, and your family, right? Because if that asset makes you 50 grand this year in income, and you don't need it because you kept your expenses low and your liabilities low, you could put it back into your assets, which means you could use your 50 grand to what? Buy mutual funds, buy real estate, buy whatever. You can take that money and buy more stuff, which will make you more money yet again. So I thought about that. How much money would you need in a mutual fund to make 50 grand a year from it? Okay? So it's really important for you guys that aren't securities licensed who won't necessarily kind of know these numbers. So if you want to make 50 grand a year, you're going to need $1 million. If you have $1 million and you take out 5%, that's $50,000 a year. Now, most investment, specialists will tell you that's not really a very sustainable amount of money, but you could put into an annuity to get that 50 grand out, but you can't get that till you're 65 years old at 5%. So how do you take 5% now? Well, really, you shouldn't do that. You should probably take more like 3. So you're going to have like closer to $1.5 million in cash. You would have to have $1.5 million, right, in order to spool off 50 grand in cash. But I can create 3 RVPs this year. And then next year they all make 100,000 plus, and I get 50 from each of that. Is it possible for me to acquire that times 3, which would be how much money? $4.5 million. All right. Is there any way that Josh Malk this year is going to save $4.5 million? No. It's not happening. How about you? No, it's not happening, right? But could you in the next year or two promote 3 RVPs?
Yeah.
If you promote 3 RVPs, do you understand when they start making 100 grand, it's the equivalent of you. If you have 3 RVPs making 100 grand, it's the equivalent of you having $4.5 million in savings. That is biblical.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Like that's mega. Okay? That's crazy. You can't do that. That's what's part of makes our business model so special is RVPs are assets. They're a whole nother business. It's like you owned or started another company. And that company that you like sold almost like you sold it, and it just pays you 50 grand a year. And a lot of them pay you a lot more than that, right? I mean, there's 2 people basically that Rick Cash overrides. Bill Whittle and Bill Travis, our upline. There's like a couple, I think there's a few others, but I don't even know who they are, right? So like our Bill's NSD leg and Bill Whittle's SNSD leg, that's the big mama, okay, pays Rick right now currently like $900,000 a year. 2 assets, 2 RVPs, right? An SNSD and an NSD that now make him $900,000 a year without getting out of bed. See what I mean? That's an asset that creates an income. That income of 900 grand allows him to have what? A really great quality of life. Like, pretty ridiculous quality of life, okay? So, I think it's really important. Just cool little lesson. Like, play with that. Think about that. I mean, I think it's important to go, it's two-edged. I got to build RVPs, but I also need to right now, I need to take the life that I built before I got here and the trouble I got myself into, as far as expenses and liabilities. I need to squeeze down, tighten up, so I can get everything paid off so that I can get to building assets, which is building RVPs. And when you're in that base shop mode and you're really driving your income, it's not so scary when you have a bad month and you don't make a lot of money if you don't have a lot of expenses and liabilities. You're kind of like, okay, that sucked, but I'm okay. I'm not bankrupt, right? I've seen people increase their liabilities so fast that when the base shop goes to crap, if something happens to their base shop, I've seen it blow them out of the business. I'm talking gone. RVP's gone because they had to go back to get a job. So because they stretched their liabilities so fast, it was just silly. They didn't acquire any assets. So anyways, hope that helps you guys this morning. Pretty cool stuff, huh?
Great. I loved it.
Yeah, thanks.